Hello, seventh graders. This is week 3, lesson 7 of New Mexico Social Studies. For the next 15 minutes, we're going to be talking about what's called the Navajo Long Walk, which started in 1864. The Navajos ended up on a reservation and they lost a lot of people, something that the Navajos are still affected by today. And it lasted until they finally got to go back around 1871. So Civil War is still going on in 1864, but not in New Mexico. The Texans have left, and also a lot of the Union soldiers have left, and that allows the Navajos to step up their attacks on villages and abandoned forts and things like that in the area. So it caused the Navajos as well as the Apaches and Comanches to start raiding a whole lot more. And this was because the American troops were not around as much. It cost the Americans a lot of money. In 1862, there were 60 Hispanics and Anglos in the villages and towns that were killed or along the Santa Fe Trail. And over $10 million in their money back then, in old money, not today's money, 10 million in goods were stolen, like cattle and other things. So the American government had to figure out what to do. Even though they were fighting this huge war, they had to come up with some way to stop these raids from hurting people out here in New Mexico. Well, Kit Carson, remember, he was a colonel of New Mexico Volunteers, and he fought at Valverde. He headed back up to Taos to be with his wife, and I think I've shown you pictures of Josefa here when she was 15. This is when she got married to Kit, and he was 33 at the time. Here she is in her late 20s, and then here she is in early 60s when she's about to pass away. Okay, so you can see the age growth, the age difference, how your body ages over time. But Carson's up there with Josefa, probably how she looked at this time, and he's asked to come back to Santa Fe because the Army needs him again. And so Joseph has already been many years without him. And so off Carson goes to Santa Fe. Okay. The guy who's in charge now is not Colonel Canby. It's a guy named James Carlton. And this is Mr. Colonel Carlton right here. He came from California to help support New Mexico during the invasion of the Texans. And he's not a very nice guy. He's a very smart guy. He wrote some books, and he's in California at the time. They give him a colonelcy, and he brings California volunteers up to Santa Fe. By that time, the Battle of Glorieta Pass was already over, but now he's in charge of New Mexico, and he has to do something about these raids. Okay, so he's the one that comes up with an idea on how to round up the Native Americans and put them on reservations, and this is going to solve the raiding problem. Okay. Well, there are a bunch of reasons why the Navajos and the Apaches were going to be placed into reservations, and so we're going to go over a couple of them that causes the Americans to react to this. In 1849, the U.S. killed their main war chief named Narbona. We talked about Narbona Pass, and how he wiped out a bunch of Hispanic soldiers and militia people before the Hispanics were trying to take Narbona's Navajo people as slaves, and that didn't work out. But he was killed in 1849. So this upsets the Navajos. The Americans build what's called Fort Defiance and Fort Wingate in Navajo, what the Navajos believe is their land. Fort Defiance is over by the border of New Mexico and Arizona by Gallup, and Fort Wingate is over by Fort Grants. Okay, so they built these forts out there. They even called one Fort Defiance, like, we're going to defy you because this is our land, it's not yours, you're Navajo, we're Americans. We're going to be defiant and build a fort right here. The Navajos then attacked the fort. They were unsuccessful at taking it over. The firepower of the fort was too strong for the Navajos, and they had to retreat. There was a horse race, and at Fort Wingate, and the Navajos were killed. 30 men were killed because of the horse race. One of the Anglos, or the Hispanic guys at the fort, said that the Navajos stole some horses, and they ended up fighting and killing each other. And there was continual raiding by the Navajos on farmlands. So this causes a lot of reasons why you need to take the Navajos and put them on a reservation, according to what the Americans thought back then. Okay, so this is a picture of some Navajo people at the time, 1860s, 1870s, around Fort Defiance. The fort's in the background here. This is a Bureau of Indian Affairs agent, and he's got some Navajo folks, men and boys, who've come into the fort to trade or to negotiate or whatever. So now Kit Carson is in Santa Fe, and Colonel Carlton says, you're going to be the guy that's going to round up these Apaches, you're going to round up these Navajos. And Kit Carson really didn't want to do this. He had already been married to 2 Native American women before Josepha. The first one died in pregnancy, the other one divorced him. And he also had a lot of contacts with natives. He didn't feel it was a good thing to do, but he's a guy that does not, he always follows orders, okay? So Carson's going to go up and round them up. So here's the first question that you need to come up with, okay, and answer on the worksheet. What were at least 3 reasons why the U.S. government decided to put the Navajo on a reservation? And we went over about 4 or 5 of them a little while ago, a couple minutes back. Take a look at that again, and you'll have the answer. Okay, so what are at least 3 reasons why the U.S. government decided to put the Navajos on reservations? Okay, that's question 1. Well, speaking of reservations, here we have the United States, and this is what the United States looks like today in reservations. You'll notice that there's a lot of reservations up in the northern parts of America, the northwest parts. There is a lot of reservations down in the southwest parts. Okay, there's some in here too, but not as much. And then there's also some reservations right here in Oklahoma, but there's nothing over here. Okay, and the reason why is not because Native Americans never lived there. They did. There was about 100,000 of them that lived there by the 1830s. But we had a president, Andrew Jackson, who wanted the Native Americans out of America. And America was from the Mississippi River right here, okay? And it was this way. Everything over here was Spanish and French, and he wanted to kick them out, okay? So, actually just Spanish. So, and he had this territory that wasn't developed, and they decided, let's put him in Oklahoma because this is a terrible place and we don't like it, and so we'll just stick him over there. And so what he did is he took all these Native Americans here and they forced them to go over to Oklahoma. And what they did was, this thing's called the Trail of Tears. About 16,000 Native Americans are killed by disease, death, starvation, or just being killed by the military on their way to Oklahoma. It's a terrible situation. We'll talk more about that in 8th grade. Well, here, this is where the Navajos are today, okay? And they're going to be, their land really was much larger than that. And Kit Carson's going to try to figure out how to get them off this land and put them on a very small patch of land called the Bosque Redondo that Colonel Carlton decided to put, it was the place where they needed to go. Okay, so Kit Carson's first, he goes off and he rounds up the Mescalero Apaches down by Las Cruces in the mountains over there, and it's really is not that hard. You just racing around on your horses. You're rounding up these people who are wanderers, and he captures them all. He captures about 400 of the Mescaleros, and they come to an agreement that they will live on the reservations and be peaceful. And the Americans will provide them with shelter and food. And so they're the first ones to go. Now, Kit Carson then heads up to Santa Fe, and the Colonel Carlton says, now I want you to go get the Navajos. Well, the Navajos is a much bigger number. They estimated anywhere between 4,000 or 5,000 Navajos. They were actually wrong. There's about 11,000 of them back then. And Carlton thought that he would round them up, take them over to the Bosque Redondo, and Kit Carson says, I don't want to do this. In fact, he gave him a letter of resignation. And Carlton took the letter and he wouldn't sign it. And he says, you know, if you don't go do this, I'm going to put you in jail. It's going to ruin your reputation. So Kit Carson decides he's going to go do it. And Carlton says what you should probably do is you should do this thing known as scorched earth, okay? And it's a way of destroying a group of people by not really destroying them, but destroying all the resources. All right. This is a Navajo family taking a picture of, at that time, you see some corn being dried. I think that's a weaving thing there. There's some family members here. This is the force of the Navajos versus the U.S. Army. So it's not going to be a very good situation. But most Americans at the time thought that the only way that Americans can live with Native Americans is to put them on reservations. That's all we can do. They just won't cooperate and be like dig into the American culture. And so we're going to put them on reservations. And if they don't want to go on the reservations, we're going to have to kill them. So it's kind of an extermination policy that a lot of government officials had back then about how to deal with the Native Americans as we were stealing their land. We had to take their land and we got to get rid of these guys. Not a very good situation at all. So one way of taking the land of the Navajos and getting them on the reservation is a thing called scorched earth. And what that means is that you come in with the military and you most likely the Navajos will scatter because the army's too big to take on. And the Navajos, now they're in small groups, okay? They're not all together in one big town. They're all over the land in small, with their hogans in small places. And there's chiefs of each group. Now, you come in there and they take off, okay? And you kill the cattle. You kill all the livestock, all the animals. You burn all the crops. You burn down the houses. You contaminate the water so it's no good for drinking. And then you move on to the next village. And Kit Carson did that from one place to the next. And he was also sending out letters, you need to come in. We won't kill you, but at the same time they see as the army comes through, they destroy everything that the Navajos have. And the Navajos are starting to starve. Okay, and this is known as the fearing time. They were afraid that if they did actually show up with to the Americans, that they would just be killed, just like all of their resources. Okay, well, scorched earth isn't anything new. It's just a way of getting what you want from an enemy. And we go back to World War II. The Germans used scorched earth against the Russians. Wherever when they started retreating back, they burned everything down. Even the United States here in Vietnam about 60 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, they did scorched earth too. They just burned all the resources of the enemy of the Americans in the 1960s. So scorched earth, it was even before that. The Romans used scorched earth. So it wasn't anything new, but it's a very vicious way of conducting war. And the Navajos had to pay for that. So everything in that picture you see here, the hogan, the wood, whatever that might be, a corral or whatever, would be destroyed. And if there were crops in the back, it'd be destroyed too. When the Navajos came back, there was nothing left. Okay, the well that they have here would be poisoned. Now this is a picture of where the Navajo area would be, and it's in New Mexico and Arizona. And this is also where they're going to leave from Fort Defiance in Arizona. They're going to come across Sandia Mountains and then come down to a place called Bosque Redondo, which is the reservation on the Pecos River. Okay, so here's the last question. Okay, last question. What does scorched earth mean? What is one enemy trying to do to the other when they practice scorched earth? So we're going to get to the reservation next on the next lesson, lesson 8. I hope you guys have a great day, a great rest of your day, and you need to go to the worksheet that's provided on your email, fill that out, and then send it back to me, okay? All right, see you later, guys.